Welcome to This Week in the Brewster, a Brewster baseball podcast where we do a quick take on the latest happenings in and around and through the BBA. I'm Ron Collins, General Manager of the Yellow Springs 9.
And I'm Justin Niles, General Manager of the Omaha Hawks.
As usual, this is a busy time in the BBA. Getting to the end of August, close to the trade deadline, playoff spots being worked on and decided. What are you seeing right now, Justin?
Well, I'm kind of surprised that, it seemed like every team around the league was making moves last week, and it sort of slowed down over the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's been quiet the last day or two. It'll be interesting to see as we've got today is Thursday, so we've got 1.5 more real-time days to go before we get rolling on the next sim. I think a lot of the buyers and the sellers are sorting themselves out, and maybe we can get into that as we roll through the divisions again.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we get that started? Let's start in the Atlantic Division in the Johnson League. Charm City's coming on strong here. They have 3 in Jacksonville coming up this week. And so that could be a huge swing factor both ways for both of these teams. If Jacksonville happens to sweep them, you can write Charm City off of the division, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a big week for the Atlantic. Charm City is on a huge run right now. Jacksonville's won 3 in a row this past sim, but still lost ground. Charm City is a dangerous team. If Jacksonville sweeps them, then that changes things dramatically. But you can go the counter also. Right now, Charm City's got a lot of momentum going. Of course, that helps because they just sat down and crashed their way through Nashville and Hawaii. I think their run differential against Nashville this last week was 18-2, so that wasn't even close.
No, it was not. Yeah, I mean that series right here is probably the most important series of the season for these two teams.
Yeah, it certainly will go a long way to set the table for the last month's run. Anyway, it's one of those time periods where you look at any particular game or any particular series and say that it's super big. And ultimately, I think it's a risk reduction thing. I mean, you just don't want to get swept. Any team that faces a competitor straight up and gets swept is just devastated. But Charm City is on a big run right now. It's going to be interesting to see how they can keep that momentum going. Montreal is also on a bit of a run, probably among the hottest teams of the division right now. But again, from last week, like I said, I just wonder whether it's a little bit too little, a little bit too late.
Absolutely. Yeah, Montreal's been hot. That's definitely not an understatement. I don't think there's any reason to think they can't catch Las Vegas, Phoenix, or Atlantic City. I think they could jump all 3 of them if they play their cards right and continue in winning as they have. I mean, they're hot. You can't put it any other way.
And I think the mystery team right now is Rockville. I don't know if you saw this or not. They effectively swept Las Vegas, which is an interesting series, and that was not what I expected. I said effectively because I think they went 3-1 against Vegas this week, and their one loss they actually blew a 7-run lead that Enrique Gomez gave them. In reality, I guess it was 3. They won, beat Vegas 3-1, 4-0, and then lost 10-9 when Juan Sweetwater drove in a run in the 10th or 12th inning, something like that, to win a game that Vegas really had no rights of winning at the time.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, actually, while we're on the topic of Rockville, I'm going to throw you my first pitch, if you don't mind, for 3 strikes and you're out. Because it has to do with
man, we're gonna start the game early. I'm game. Go for it.
We're talking about Rockville. We're talking about them being interesting. They just had a season-ending injury to Bob Coleman. He wasn't their ace by any means, but that still leaves a pretty hefty spot in the rotation. If you're Rockville, do they move to a 4-man rotation? Do they fill the spot with the current member on their roster, a minor leaguer, or are we making a trade? Tomorrow's the trade deadline. What are we doing?
Yeah, tomorrow's the trade deadline, and Aaron Weiner, the general manager of that team, is not averse to making trades if it makes sense for them. I just have to question whether it makes sense. First off, that's a big loss. Coleman was having a nice season, and that number 3, number 4 kind of a guy is a big deal, especially as you roll into the playoffs. So kind of a little bit of a semi-soul crusher there for Rockville, I think, and Rockville fans who have desperately needed this team to continue to move forward in their rebuild. I think the answer we're going to see is probably calling up of Masahiro Ogawa. Big Poppy, I think is his nickname. Really nice looking 21-year-old kid, super hard thrower. He's not completely ready, but he's about as ready as you could get, I think. At the bottom line, I think he's been in AA for a couple of years now, and he's throwing some pretty big numbers there. I would guess that Aaron will not rip up his minors in the process of trying to fix the Coleman problem, since Ogawa looks like he's pretty much ready. And on a last note, I guess, on Rockville's build, for those folks looking to figure out how to do a build, you could do a lot worse than looking at what Aaron's done here, because you look at his team, it's really good. It's really young, and he's still got lots of depth going on in his minor leagues. You could see Rockville being a major player for a couple of years.
Absolutely. And Ogawa, you mentioned AA. He's actually been in AAA the last 2 years. He's put a 2.20 ERA last year, 3.31 this year, with a FIP of 3.01 and 4.18. The critics are going to say he only has 2 pitches. His curveball never developed, but why not give him a shot?
Yeah, and his curveball could still come in. He's only 21 years old. You have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you completely there. Yes, Rockville's got a good team, but I have to ask myself, if I'm Rockville, do I really think I'm going to win the Landis this year, or do I want to continue to build for next year?
Yeah, not just the Landis, but I mean, if he had a really solid shot at that last little burst of energy to take the division and get a much nicer playoff slot, it might be worth it to make a big deal. But at this stage, I think I think Rockville is pretty comfortable with being in the playoffs, barring some catastrophic disaster.
Absolutely, yeah. He's five and a half games up in the wild card. He's 10 and a half back in the division. So I agree. You kind of stay where you're at, and you hope that maybe when you do get to the playoffs, maybe then you go to a 4-man rotation. Let's move down to the Southern Division. Havana still got a lead, maybe not as much of a lead.
They had a week that they needed to have. They took 3 of 4 from Jacksonville, which is a big deal, and 2 of 3 from New Orleans, which is an even bigger deal. So perhaps they're going to hold on better than I personally thought that they would. I thought they were in a bit of a tailspin here, but this last week definitely helped them a really long way.
Yeah, they got a pretty cushy schedule too the rest of the year. They play Valencia, they play San Antonio, who I had in the playoffs a couple weeks ago, but they've fallen off pretty hard. They play Nashville, they have Hawaii. They have Brooklyn, so they're not facing the toughest of the toughest for the rest of the year, and so I just don't see them giving up that spot in the top of the division.
Yeah, I think so much of it comes down to that pitching and what ends up happening. And the other thing is, I mean, this New Orleans team is really super hot. They went 4-2. I mean, Havana just had a really nice week and did not stretch out their lead, right? And I'm looking at what's happening in New Orleans, and at the end of the day, they have not only the hottest pitcher, but maybe the hottest pair of pitchers going right this minute in Hector Amaral and the no-hitter guy, Freddie Delgado, right? I was doing some looking at this earlier today. When you add up their last 2 months of work between those 2 pitchers, they are 12-3 with a 1.26 ERA and have only given up 4 home runs in their 127 innings. This is literally probably the most deadly 1-2 punch going on right now. And when you look at some of what's going on in Havana, I know I've struggled with Feliciano Rafael. He's getting plastered right now, and that worries me. If Rafael in any way drops off at the end of this, in this last month, New Orleans is right there, and that's it's kind of like watching a NASCAR race where the number 2 car is still a little too far behind to draft.
and New Orleans has a pretty solid third starter as well in Yamaguchi. He struggled early in the year, but July and August he had an ERA of 2.6 and 2.63. So he seems to have figured it out as well, and so. If the 1-2 punch doesn't have you, the third punch is going to get you. Yeah.
And quite honestly, maybe one of the hottest teams in the division is Phoenix.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, Phoenix has kind of came out of nowhere to be right on Las Vegas's heels, and they're in the wild card discussion again.
They beat Havana 2 out of 3 last week. They stumbled against Huntsville, which is anytime you lose against Huntsville, you worry. But at the end of the day, they were 4-2. They have a hot pitcher in Jose Trujillo right now also. So obviously they're not in the conversation for the division leadership, but in that question of the Johnson League wild card right now, they are clearly stepping up into the conversation. And in my mind, the Las Vegas, Phoenix, Montreal question, they're all within 2.5 games of the wild card with what we have about 35 games or so to go, give or take a little bit.
And they have, let's see, they have 10 of those against Huntsville and Nashville in September. Phoenix does, and so that they're setting up pretty well as well.
Yeah. So don't rule Sean Marco and the Phoenix Talons out. Quite an interesting division chase going on right now. They have a pretty interesting demarcation between kind of the haves and the have-nots.
They're still behind on the run differential, which scares me a little bit, but they've been hot, and I have no doubt in my mind they're going to finish. They're going to finish ahead by the end of the year, but it still makes me question whether or not they're pretty much dead last in batting average. They haven't really came alive as far as runs have gone either. To be 10th in runs scored and 7th in runs allowed doesn't scream playoff team to me.
Yeah, you have to look at their entire body of work, and we're also getting to the time period where this is a fantastic time period, right? You start looking at actual situations rather than kind of like overall big picture numbers, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If you're a Phoenix fan, it doesn't matter what's happened in the past. It only matters that you got 35-ish more games to go, and you need to find a way to win 2 more than Las Vegas. Or whatever combination goes on. At the end of the day, you've run, using the NASCAR analogy, right? You've run your 450 miles and you're in 4th place or whatever. And now you don't care about what happened in those 450 miles. You only care what's going to happen in the next 50.
And since August 1st, they've won 65% of their games. They're 13-7 this month, and so they seem to have certainly turned a corner after struggling in July.
Yeah. So you just never know. Baseball's a fantastic game.
Well, why don't we hop down to the Heartland division? Louisville's right on your tail. They've
Could we just skip the Heartland division this week?
Absolutely not. There's a 4-game split coming up the first part of September. I believe it's a 4-game split. I think it has to favor you guys with a chance to increase to a 2 or 3 game lead just because it's at Yellow Springs. But who really knows? Louisville was so far behind earlier this year, and they've once again come out of nowhere and have a great chance of winning the Heartland.
Yeah, just flat out, we knew as a Yellow Springs representative, right, we knew that this part of the schedule was going to be tough for us. We knew we needed to make a little bit of a gap because the schedule was going to turn. We've really got another week or two, actually, where we need to kind of hold on by the skin of our teeth, and then we get to that Louisville series. And like we talked about in the Atlantic, everything is kind of lining up right now to where ideally Louisville and Yellow Springs are going to be, a game or 2 apart when it comes to that series. So that could be a really kind of raucous, almost winner-take-all kind of series.
Absolutely. And you guys are so evenly matched. I mean, your home, away records, your extra inning records, they're all essentially identical.
There you go. But, we need to both get through you guys. So if you guys could lay over against us and then stand up against Louisville, that would be a pretty good thing, for Omaha to do.
We've kind of held our own against Louisville this year, and we haven't done that with you guys. So we usually have no problem laying over for anybody. But we'll
Well, I think that's being a little bit too coy there, seeing that Omaha still has a not unreasonable shot at the wild card. It's looking a little bit less likely as the days go along. But the Madison newspapers put out an article today about how Madison is kind of trying to hold on, and using the race car analogy, it almost feels like Madison has come around the 4th turn on the last lap and run out of gas. And so we're waiting breathlessly to see whether they can coast their way to the finish line before Omaha catches them.
Absolutely. The last 3 weeks of the schedule might really help us out, but we got to get through these first 3 weeks. We've played better at home, and we've actually played 10 more road games than home games, meaning we have 10 more home games still remaining than road games right now. And so hopefully that should help us out a little bit too. But yeah, I don't see us catching Madison. To be completely honest, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, if I were a betting person, I would not actually bet big cash on the idea of you catching them. But it's not impossible to see.
No, absolutely not. As long as the magic number is not 0, we're still in this to go. So, Why don't we hop down to the Pacific Division here? Calgary and Long Beach in the Pacific. Calgary actually hosts Long Beach 7 games to end the season. I don't think we can disagree that that's going to decide the division. There's a 2-game split between them right now, and if Calgary has 7 games at home against Long Beach, I mean, that series right there is what decides who wins this division.
I'm going to go out on a semi-limb and say Calgary will probably be leading the division when they get to that series. And for me, it's mostly about how the teams feel as I watch them go through their last week or two. I mean, Calgary feels like a team that is kind of on a trajectory and doing the things that it's just kind of business as usual for them as they charge forward, right? Long Beach feels like it's a team that's trying to deal with the fact that they're fading a little bit. They lost a tough game against California. They lost another tough game against Madison, 2 one-run games. In fact, the last 3 losses have each been by 1 run. So it's like there's this desperate essence there that I don't feel when I look at Calgary. I mean, Calgary just bought out 2 years of Karabyte's arbitration. They're going to get Mario Soriano back in another week or 2. They've got a couple other guys coming off the disabled list. Things are just feel like they're coming together for Calgary right now, whereas it feels like Long Beach is searching.
Right. No, I wouldn't disagree with that one bit. Long Beach did just shut out Cal. I don't know if there's really a hotter team. California's been just as hot as anybody, and they shut them out 2 of the 3 games they played, and they took 2 or 3 from Madison. There's still 1 game to be played left in that series, but once again, just like a lot of other people, Long Beach has a pretty cozy schedule until they get to Calgary at the end of September.
Yeah, and California is an interesting week. Ted has long bemoaned some of his offensive inconsistencies, and last week, not only did they lose a couple of them to Long Beach, they were shut out in 2 straight games, which is not really a very good sign. And in fact, they beat Louisville 2-1 2 days before that. So over a period of 4 days, they scored a total of 7 runs, which does make you a little bit kind of step back and go, what happened there? Right. And especially since they were at Long Beach for 3 of those games, and Long Beach is not the Death Valley of Crusaders ballpark. So interesting times in the Pacific.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we move over to our 3 strikes and you're out, and you throw me a pitch. I threw you one just a little bit ago.
There you go. I'm 1 pitch ahead of you, so or you're 1 pitch ahead of me, depending on whether we're the pitchers or the batters. I guess we're the pitchers here, so. Let me throw out my first strike, and that will be, let's go with Montreal's Jubal Troop, 24-year-old Jubal Troop, who won the Johnson League Nebraska last year. But as a couple other folks have commented, he's been kind of searching. He hasn't really put it all together yet this year. He's 10-9, I think, with a 4.78 ERA. So the question that I have for you is for next year, right, as you look at Jubal Troop, if I put the over-under on his ERA next year at 3.6, what do you think?
I would take the over on this any day. Troop has 2 really good pitches. He throws hard. However, he can't keep the ball in the ballpark. And that's shined both this year and in 2032. He's putting guys on base again way more often than to have his ERA lower than 3.6. If I would have been Montreal, I probably would have sold on him high when I had the opportunity last year. Just for what it's worth, I probably would have taken the over on this had you said 4.0 ERA.
Seriously? 4.0? That's
absolutely.
Interesting.
Yep. I know it's a small sample size. He's only been in the league 3 years. If you take out last season, he has not put together a very good season other than last year. He had a 5.94 ERA. This year he has a 4.78. Last year he had the 3.22 Nebraska winner, like you said. I would take the over on this, absolutely. He's walking too many batters, and then he's giving up the long ball, and those batters are coming across the plate.
Yeah, I would probably take the over on 3.6. I don't think I would take the over on 4.0. Young pitchers coming up through the ranks, to me, are always fun to watch. And so I also like Jubal Troop because he's kind of the poster child for that kind of mid-range third pitch, because that changeup is not quite major league level if the average person looks at it, but the rest of them are strong enough to carry him. I will also say that if you look at only his last, I think it was 5 outings. I was doing some math, so you always have to be careful with my math. But in his last 5 outings, I think he's 3-1 with a 3.09 ERA. So the challenge with these young kids is you just don't know what's going to happen until they get up into the 26, 27-year-old range. So I'm extremely interested to see what is going to happen with Jubal Troop.
So the month of April, he pitched 30 innings, gave up 10 home runs and 15 walks. The month of May, he pitched 30 innings and gave up 2 home runs. And so, I mean, it's completely a crapshoot, it seems, with him. I think you have to take the average of that and figure he's going to give up 6 home runs every 30 innings. So you're looking at him giving up 20 to 25 home runs a year, which isn't awful, but it's still not going to be, if he's walking that many batters, he's not going to put up an ERA that's very low.
The two together are a big deal. You can get away with giving up a lot of home runs, or you can get away with having a lack of control, but you can't get away with both. And his numbers right now that's really kind of how he's struggling, I think. Alrighty, give me your pitch number 2.
Billy Chappell Jr., he recently got win number 250. Congrats to him. He's 38 years old. He's got a contract option, a team option for next season with Madison. Do they execute this option? If they do, what's the over and under on starts and wins? If I put it at 10 starts and 3 wins, what are you taking for this Hall of Famer?
No. No, I can't see the option being taken by Madison. I think that Madison is still looking at being a championship caliber team. I think they're going to get some of their pitchers back off of the disabled list, and I think that Billy Chappell Jr. and Madison will shake hands at the end of the season and say thanks for your time and congratulations on your 250th victory, because Madison bent over backwards to make sure that he could get it. So in that sense, I really almost hope that Billy Chappell Jr. is then done, right? I mean, he's 38 now. He's got this big row of stars next to his name in the game. He's got 3 Nebraskas, a Landis ring. My heart says let him go out with dignity, because what's his ERA now, like 6.09 or 6.90? I can't remember.
Yep, 6.90.
I'd just like to see that happen. Now, that having been said, I think there's a path for him to actually make those 10 starts. And that is if you see one of these expansion teams that are going to come in and look for a person to bring some fans into the stadium. In that case, I think that if you say 10 starts and 3 wins, I would go over on that, because I think that a expansion team that would give him a $1 million or $2 million to come in and pitch would basically just say, I'm going to let him throw a 7 ERA and he's going to win 5 games.
So you think he's going to get there? You're just thinking it's not going to be with Madison?
I do not think. I would say no. Madison will not take his option. And if you change the pitch to say that another lower level team gives him a contract to pitch, then I will take the over on the 10-3.
Very fair.
My second pitch. If you look at the standings right now, Nashville, Hawaii, Des Moines, and Edmonton are on the bottom of the 4 divisions. Obviously, realignment is going to give us 6 divisions. And obviously, Edmonton is in a totally different space than those 3. So let me take Edmonton off the list and put in Huntsville, who is another team that clearly is struggling. So Nashville, Hawaii, Des Moines, and Huntsville. Which of these 4 make the playoff first, and how many years does it take?
This is going to be a real toss-up. I think Huntsville is going to be very limited due to the salary cap situation their last GM put them in. So I'm taking them out of the picture for now, just by process of elimination. Des Moines spending quite a bit of money, but they still seem like they're a ways off as well. That just leaves Nashville and Hawaii. I think they're pretty close in makeup together. Nashville seems to have a plan. Nobody knows what that plan is, but he does say he has a plan.
It's the brains plan.
It is. Nobody knows what it is, but he's got it. So we'll let it come to fruition like that. They're also going to be very well put together up the middle. They have Angel Garcia, Grant Lee covering center field. Angel Garcia is a shortstop there. The starting pitching of this team is just a little bit suspect. Not a lot of talent in the minor leagues as far as pitchers go. They do have Jefferson Pierce and Martin Torres down there, but Torres is 24 years old, and he's been brought up twice, and he's been absolutely throttled both times in limited work. Pierce might not ever develop his changeup, and his curveball isn't much better, so that might limit his ability to be a productive starter. Looking at Hawaii, they seem to be pretty well built at the middle as well. They got Fernando Martinez at second base, Ernesto Alfecci sitting at AAA with a decent bat, and he's going to be a good center fielder. Benton Allen playing on the lower level of the minors. I think he's ready for AAA, maybe the majors. And Dave Talent is another name to watch. He's got a good bat and he's being groomed to play any position he can play. On the pitching side, Juan Trujillo looks to be the real deal as long as he can keep the ball in the ballpark. He doesn't have very much movement on his pitches. Charlie Ironknife is another guy, and they have about 5 other guys that look like they could maybe be 4 or 5 starters. So it's pretty hard to choose between those two teams. I'm actually not going to. I'm going to say that they're both going to make the playoffs in the next 3 years.
Interesting. Both of them, 3 years.
I think both of them are sitting in at least a wild card spot within 3 years.
I wouldn't argue against you in that sense, but I'm going to actually pick Hawaii of the collection. And to me, it was actually between Des Moines and Hawaii. I'm happy to know that Nashville has a plan, but at the present time, since I don't see it, I struggle with it. And I know that Mike Beiske, I think that's how you pronounce Mike's last name. I apologize, Mike, if I've murdered it. But I think he's got a track record, and I think you look at the minor league pitchers that he has as well as the position players, and I think he's the best situated to make the next step. It might be another year before he really hits the button, so I'm thinking that 3-year cycle is probably about right. I like Des Moines also, but they haven't quite figured out what the regime change is going to be. They've got Cisco Ariola and William Moreland, of course, are their 2 big-name players. So it almost feels like for them to take the next step forward, they either need to let those 2 play out their time and then build in behind them, or trade the 2 and make that happen a little faster. So I don't know if Des Moines is going to be a true top-tier playoff team in less than 3 years, either direction that they go.
Right. The only thing I don't like about Des Moines is they have Ernesto Chavez signed at third base for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
And they also have Victor Cantu signed for the next 2 years, and then team options after that.
Yeah. They get far enough along, they can buy one or both of those out, but that can't happen right away.
No, and Ramon Hernandez is locked up for a while as well, and he's having a pretty bad year as well. And so he's locked up for the next 3 years. And so between the 3 of those guys, I think they're going to have some salary problems.
Yep.
And that's the only reason I was hesitant to throw them out so quick, is because they have some money locked up, and I don't think they're quite here yet.
That's kind of where I'm at. I think they can actually win a few games in the next couple of years as far as that goes. You know, they can be a 75 to 85 win team if things bounce right for them, because anytime you've got superstars on your team like Ariola and Moreland, you can actually potentially win some games, but they don't have enough to get them over the hump in the way I look at it, and they probably won't with some of those contract problems for a little while. But, you know, Edward has been working on that, so we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to throw you my last pitch and hopefully strike you out here. With the division realignment, Louisville's leaving the Heartland next year and moving to the Johnson Southeast Division. What is the outlook for the Southeast with Jacksonville, New Orleans, Louisville, and an up-and-coming Nashville team all in the same division? Did this division just overtake the Heartland as potentially the toughest?
Oh, man, arrow to the heart. Just arrow to the heart. You're going to ask me to actually respond in an intellectual way to this emotional question. Ouch.
There's nobody more excited than to see Louisville lead the division than I am. I wish it would have been yours 9 just because I can't beat you guys. And so...
Well, see, I'm not excited about Loserville leaving the division, but that having been said, I think the answer is it depends, and it probably depends on how you define the toughest, which is part of this whole conversation about what the best division in baseball is anyway. I mean, Jacksonville, New Orleans, and Loserville are all really strong elite teams right now, and so by definition, that top end of that division is going to be really strong. And Nashville and Huntsville, they're going to. I mean, it's like a oil and water thing with a gap there. Nashville and Huntsville are going to be not so good for a while. I'm not as big on Nashville as you obviously are. But at the end of the day, I think if you really like the idea of the toughest division being give me your top 2 or 3 teams, you'd have to talk about the Johnson League Southeastern or Southeast or whatever, Gulf Coast, whatever they're going to call this division, as being a really strong division. But, geez, the Johnson Atlantic with Charm City, Rockville, Montreal are likely to be just about as tough on the top end, right? But Atlantic City is on a downward trend. We don't know what Jared is going to be able to, or Joshua is going to be able to get accomplished there. Allen and Brooklyn is always fiddling and tweedling, but you know, that's going to be a tough division. But really, you look at what's left in the Heartland. Madison, that's a championship team. Omaha is on the big run up. If people haven't been looking at that pitching staff, and yes, the addition of Nikto and Klulo definitely help. They're not absolute top tier starters, but they're really solid 3-4, 2-3-4 kind of guys. And you already had a super young staff. Twin Cities, when Yellow Springs was coming up through the ranks, we made the off season or the postseason in 2026. We thought 2027 was going to be fantastic, and we just kind of crashed and burned, and then we bounced back. Twin Cities, to me, looks a lot like that. They've got some serious talent. Ideally, Yellow Springs won't drop too much, but, guys, you never know, knock on woods. And like I just said, Des Moines, I think if things work out well, Edwards' team can turn a 500 plus kind of a number, especially if the schedules are not division centric. So meaning he doesn't have to get completely beat up inside our Heartland. So I don't know. The Frick Pacific is going to be fairly tough too. Long Beach, Havana, or whatever SoCal is going to be in California are all really elite teams or tough, strong teams right now. Valencia, you can never tell about. Hawaii obviously is going to struggle for another year or two before they get going. I'm reluctant to suggest that the Heartland is not going to be the toughest division because I think top to bottom, the Heartland has absolutely no gimmies.
I like to think that. But teams come to Omaha and we're the gimme.
Last year, you almost made the playoffs. You still have a pretty reasonable shot at the playoffs this year, and you are super and young. You're not going to be the gimme in 2035 without any doubt.
I would hope not. We have some room. So hopefully something happens. Hopefully Louisville leaving the division helps us out and we can all of a sudden win some baseball games.
Alrighty, here's my pitch 3. Let me see if I can strike you out. Rookie, Mitch Dalrymple. Clearly about the surest thing possible there is for a lock on the Johnson League Rookie of the Year. Or Frick League, sorry. But take him off the table. Who's next? Vancouver, Jesus Marte. Mexico City's Mike Ellis. You got somebody else?
I thought I had you struck out because I was going to say Mitch is probably going to win the Frick League Rookie of the Year, not the Johnson League Rookie of the Year. However, I don't think Mitch is even a lock. I really don't think he's a lock, even if he's on the table. I think that it would be fascinating if Jesus Marte won. He's 26 years old, getting his first crack at the big leagues. But I'm actually putting my money on California's Miguel Bumblebee Ramos to win this year's Rookie of the Year. He's 14-5. He's a starting pitcher. He's 14-5 on a red-hot surging California club. He's got a sparkling 2.34 ERA. It's nearly half the league's average. I think that's my Rookie of the Year in the Frick League this year.
Oh my, you just hit a massive, massive home run off of me because that's exactly what I was going to try to sneak past you. I was going to try to get you to be focusing on one of these fantastic hitters that we have. And Miguel Ramos not only may be the Rookie of the Year, but he may end up winning the Nebraska.
That's absolutely. Talking about the Johnson League, you briefly brought that up. I think that's a two-horse race between Phoenix's Thad Meyer and Havana's Luis Maldonado. Both have been pretty impressive in the field and really hitting the ball well. I think if Meyer hadn't been caught stealing so many times, it would probably swing in his favor, but right now it's a two-horse race between those two guys.
Could very well be. I picked the Frick in this particular pitch because of the whole Mitch Dalrymple thing on the offensive side of things. I think the race in the Johnson League is a little bit more level and intriguing because Ramos and Dalrymple are kind of clearly the number 1 and number 2 guy, pitcher, hitter, whereas in the Johnson you've got a little bit more of a homogeneous mix there. I could see the voting being extremely close.
Yeah, absolutely. Atlantic City's got what's his name? Stanley Permuter. He's 21. He's got 28 home runs this year, so I mean he should probably be in the discussion for the Rookie of the Year as well. But if we're talking about the Frick League, it's all about Bumblebee.
Well, already, I think that runs us through the division. I think that runs us through our 3 strikes and you're out. You threw a perfect 11-0 shutout in our first round. I managed to nip you 6-5 in the second round. We'll have to see if we get a clear victor in this third round. I'm looking forward to see what the votes have to say.
I think the vote should probably swing in my favor just because of the Bumblebee catch.
Well,
We'll see what happens.
we'll just have to see there. Maybe they'll view it as I gave you a softball and they'll take pity on me or something.
Absolutely. Well, it's been fun. Looking forward to doing this again next week and hopefully discussing maybe some last second trades that went down and potentially looking at some playoff matchups.
That'll be fun. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
The Brewster Baseball Association is an out-of-the-park baseball league that's commissioner is the one and only Matt Rechtenwald and is competed in by 28 amazing general managers. Check us out at montybrewster.net. Music is Take to the Skies by Forget the Whale and is used through Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial License. See you next time, Brewster fans. Until then, have fun, be safe, and always remember that defense is highly overrated.